Hello everybody, Rebusplays here, welcoming you to a review for a brand new game that just came out on February 21st of 2018. The game is called Usurper. Basically, to kind of give a quick gist of the game, it is a Metroidvania style game that basically is very difficult with Dark Souls elements thrown into it. So I thought we'd do a nice little review for the game on the channel. Alright, so the story of Usurper is kind of an odd story. You play as basically this amalgamation creature that's a bunch of different arms and legs and everything and like eyes called Walthem. And he was attempting to beat the main enemy of this place called the Citadel. The main enemy is this character called the Navigator. The Navigator ends up beating Walthem and casting him into this pit. So while he's in this pit, he's looking for like a corpse to take over, and he ends up finding one of the knights that was actually fighting the Navigator as well, called Saragot. Saragot is one of the four knights, so he's actually a powerful character. And Walthem heals all of his internal organs, all that kind of stuff. He basically brings him back to life. And the deal is Saragot will end up helping Walthem defeat the Navigator in exchange for his body. So he'll get his body back, everything will go with that. And it's kind of funny because Walthem starts off as this ugly amalgamation, and then when they show him again, he's like this ridiculously hot cliche anime looking vampire dude. So basically, as Saragot's body, so this is kind of reminiscent of Shadows of Mordor, the two entities inside one body. As Saragot, you're going to traverse the Citadel, getting towards the Navigator, and you're going to defeat him. All of this game takes place in London, so it's very Lovecraftian. You'll see a lot of the enemies have this Lovecraftian look to them, and they still kind of have that there's donating to the gods, all that kind of stuff. But we'll get into that more in the gameplay section. But pretty much it is a story of revenge and taking out the Navigator. So now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this game. So the gameplay. How does this game play? Is it worth actually playing Usurper? So the best way to describe this is it is a Metroidvania style game. You play through it in a 2D realm. There's a lot of platforming, jumping up to platforms, fighting enemies, and such. You'll actually collect different weapons, once again similar to Castlevania, except a lot of these items, instead of them being dropped from enemies, are found inside coffins. One of the first weapons you'll find, at least in the full version, is you will find a rapier. It's the very first weapon you usually find, other than your short sword. And each of these weapons is tied to different stats that you can level up on your character. So similar to Dark Souls, you can actually build out your character and spec him out any way you really want. The character build, you could basically go with strength. You could go with a magic-based intelligence build. You could go with straight defensive build with high guard, high HP, that kind of stuff. So each of these weapons is tied to how they'll grow in strength. So if you have a weapon that's very strength-centric and you're building into strength, it'll start getting stronger, you'll start doing more damage. Now, a big thing with this game is similar to Dark Souls. You cannot quickly keep attacking. If you just keep going and flailing, basically you're going to lose very quickly. And you'll see that in some of the videos that are playing in the background. So the way this game handles it is you have this meter called GRD. It's your guard meter. Any action you take, swinging a sword, dodging, doing anything, reduces this meter temporarily. It does refill similar to a stamina gauge. But the key difference with this is that the stamina gauge or the guard gauge can go into the negatives with each attack. So if an enemy hits you, if you have a full gauge, let's say you have a full guard gauge, the damage is subtracted from the guard gauge before it's taken from your HP. HP cannot be like recovered except from like sitting on thrones, which are your main method of saving your games, leveling up. It's kind of where like most of the shopkeepers and that kind of stuff will be. So if an enemy attacks, you have like 200 guard, and his attack does 180. You'll be left with 20 guard. It will not take from your HP, and that'll recharge as a shield. So that's a big thing. But basically, some of the weapons you will get will take 120 guard. So it'll basically wipe out your guard, and you'll start going into negatives, where enemies will do more damage to you. So it's kind of this weird mechanic of balancing and not just like, constantly attacking. You do have to dodge. Dodging, if you dodge perfectly, restores part of the guard gauge. There's also a little thing that if you basically take so much damage that you would be killed instantly, you get like a last stand kind of motif going on. You won't immediately die. It'll refill your guard gauge, and it's like an additional hit. This is very important for a lot of the harder hitting enemies, especially if you don't build into like a defensive build. So leveling up is handled at these thrones. You basically need two things. You need kind of your souls, very reminiscent of Dark Souls. And you also need an amulet thing called like a V1. The amulets can be found in chests throughout the map. This requires you to constantly keep searching, opening up treasure chests that are brand new. So anytime you open up a treasure chest that isn't a coffin, usually you'll get one of these amulets. If you die, you do not lose the amulets. You only lose like the souls that you have gathered. The souls can be reclaimed up to like the last death when you go back through. So if you end up dying, you go back to the throne. If you can make it all the way back to where you died, you can pick up the souls that you lost until that point. You do keep the amulets. So basically these amulets are the most important thing for leveling up everything. To level up any of your personal stats, you will need an amulet. To buy magic, you'll need an amulet. To basically level up familiars. Yes, there's familiars in this game that act as pets. One of the first ones you will get is a creature called Hysteria that basically just fires a bolt. It follows you. But to level her up, or him if it's a guy, you will need one of these amulets. So the amulets are a very finite resource. You don't get a ton of them. And there's actually a character in the game that'll trade you an amulet for a souls if you want. I don't recommend this because I've never hit that point that I needed a bunch of souls that I'd be willing to get rid of that. He even says that they're finite. So there's a lot of different mechanics. There's also another mechanic which isn't readily apparent until later into the game, where you basically can devote yourself to an old god. I always seem to devote myself to the one that looks like Yogg-Saron from Hearthstone and WoW. I don't know why, I just really like Yogg. So all these different gameplay elements of like really drive home like a difference. It's a lot of mixture of like Castlevania with Dark Souls, and then kind of a little bit of like that sprinkling of Dead Cells thrown into the gameplay. Basically, it's a Castlevania game. That's the only way to describe the gameplay. If you played any of the old Symphony of the Night games and such, you'll kind of get an idea of how it plays. Alright, so visually, this game is actually really impressive looking. I love the 2D sprite aspect of each character, of each monster. Everything kind of has a definite feel. You definitely feel like you're playing a game that's set to be Lovecraftian. Creatures are kind of like weird hodgepodge. There's giant eyeballs. There's weapons that like are bits of bone mashed into meat. Like, there's a lot of like weird Lovecraftian things. I mean, there's a giant guy that's like infested with parasites that you can devote yourself to the gods through. So there's a lot of weird Lovecraftian 2D sprite elements. It definitely looks beautiful as you kill enemies. They like kind of mangle into corpses. If you defeat like creatures, everything like that. So when you actually do talk to characters, this is kind of a cool aspect. The characters have these portraits. They all like are kind of like this hand, like not sprite, but they kind of look like anime sprite characters. So it definitely has this unique flow of like the characters match up to like what their actual sprites look like. So you're not like going like, who the hell is that guy? He doesn't look anything like his sprite. It looks beautiful. The environments are varied. You'll sometimes be going underground. There's also underwater area. There's also pits. There's towns. There's a lot of different variation between the different environments, and it definitely gives it a great aesthetic, and it looks beautiful. So sound-wise, this game is definitely pretty good. Everything has like a really weird, unique sound to it. I would say the weirdest thing, though, is the very beginning. You will hear this kind of like weird squishing noise as Walthem is in his abomination form. It's very gross and spongy sounding. It's kind of gross. But characters definitely have like, you know, when they attack, you hear like good sound effects for it. Every weapon has definitely a swing sound associated with it. A lot of the gameplay does revolve around listening for sounds, listening to kind of get those cues on when enemies are going to attack you through sounds, through visuals. It is very necessary, and it matches up really well. You definitely do feel like in a foreboding area, and I actually do compliment the sound very highly for this game. Alright, so the controls are the, unfortunately, one area I really have to knock this game. The game suffers if you're playing on a controller. Normally, for default mapping, your attack is on like the right bumper, and it's just like a weird, like, left bumper does like your other like dodges and that kind of stuff. X is to like interact with things. A's to jump. So there's a lot of like weird... It's a weird control scheme that doesn't always make sense. But you can actually remap it to different controls so that you're not kind of feeling that weirdness. I know one of the things I did was I mapped like the roll, dodge, all that to B. Jump to A. X was, I believe, my attack. And then, like, the other stuff I just kind of, like, mixed around to other areas as it felt good. But that still doesn't fix the problem of, at times, you'll feel like you've dodged something, or you've actually, like, input something, and then feel like a slight delay. At times... you don't feel like you're actually in control of your own like movements. This can especially be seen when you have to use like the block. It's not like a block mechanic, but it's kind of like an aura sphere that goes around you briefly. It's to block projectiles. And you can definitely see this when certain enemies are very fast attackers. They'll just throw it at like a beam, a sword or something out very quickly, and you can reflect it. At times it will feel like the delay is there, like you hit it and the character doesn't immediately do this. Also, there's a little, sometimes where there's a weird visual cue of like, you're not sure where the iframes of your dodge are. So it's kind of a weird like system. The game does respond really well actually to jumping. It is fully mappable. It's controller supported now. Keyboard supported. Basically anything you want to play it with. So I do say that's decent, but there is a slight delay, at least on the controller side of the controls. Alright, so score-wise, what do I think of this game? If I had to give it a rough score out of 10, I would give this game at least a solid 8 out of 10. There's definitely some areas that I can see some improvement on. There's a lot of times where it doesn't feel like the controls do kind of get messed up. There's a little bit of a difficulty curve. I know that'll turn people away so much. This game is very much Dark Souls. You will get beaten in this game so many times. The first boss took me probably 10 plus times just to see his variety of like attack patterns, different like when I need to dodge, when I didn't need to dodge, and then there was a second form to him. So this game is by no means easy. It'll also turn a lot of people off at the fact that there is a ton of backtracking. If you do not like Dark Souls, if you do not like Cuphead, if you do not like those games where you're going to keep repeating it over and over and over again, this is not a game for you. It is brutal. So I do give it an 8 out of 10. I think it's an amazing game. I want to play more of it. I definitely want to see further into the game. I want to just figure out what the hell like this Navigator did, how to like what his entire story. I want to see everything with it. So I do enjoy that. It's a solid game. Alright, so my final thoughts on this game. Basically, I think this is a great game. I do. I love the fact that before you even start a new game, they took into consideration people who wanted to add difficulty or add more to this game. I can't imagine how like you can add more difficulty to this and still have fun with it, but you can. There are people that are sadists out there, so basically you can, before you start a game, you can add time attack. You can add that you only have 1 HP, that you can't level up. So there's a lot of permadeath. You can even add permadeath. And it adds a lot more to the game. It adds replayability, especially since they added New Game Plus. So I think the one thing I definitely look forward to, and I hope definitely happens with this, I hope this game takes off. I do. I love this game. I think it's a great game. And I hope it takes off because I would love to see some of the speed runs that are going to come out of this game. I think my fastest time was about 3 minutes, and that's just because I died so quickly. One of the first options you can take is to basically reject his offer of like using your body, and the game immediately ends. There's an achievement for it too. So yeah, it was my fastest speed run. Got the worst ending. There's also card support with this game, achievement support, so lots of good stuff there. I really do hope it takes off. And I would recommend this game if you want something brutal. If you just beat Cuphead, you just beat Dark Souls, and you're like, man, I really could use something that's just going to kick my butt some more, I would recommend picking up Usurper. Right now it is only like $10. So give it a try. And finally, I hope you guys liked this video. I really do. If you did like this video, please leave a like, please leave a comment, and please subscribe. And for more videos like this, I'll catch you next time, guys. But this is Rebus saying, see you later.